call, and we know who it is. It's Nelson Slater. Hello, Visual Radio Live.
Hi, this is Nelson Slater.
And this is Joe Viglione. How are you, Nelson?
Great. How about yourself?
Wonderful. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Quite well, thank you.
Great. We're live on the air. Thank you so much for calling. Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from the city of Oiho in the state of Itaniknik.
You got that the other way around, right?
Well, yeah. I'm actually on the reverse side. According to the topic you asked me to speak on tonight.
Well, I have a number of topics. I want to talk about R&B records with you, and I want to talk about your record again, Wild Angel, and your band. But let's talk about what we were discussing when I was in my car talking to you, the Mayan calendar.
Yes.
So you're saying that it's good news what happened?
Oh, absolutely. Now, notwithstanding the Mayan calendar, which correlates to all this, largely through the work of a great scholar named Jose Arguello, who really brought all this into our consciousness about 25 years ago. And he was able to translate the remaining scripture or the writings or the history of that culture to the point where he was able to read, to the point where we figured out that that was a calendar that fell just this past Friday in correlation with the movement of our solar system and some of our local space around our solar system, which is a local area of the Milky Way galaxy. Now we have lined up in a unique position, which lines up to what you would call the horizontal plane of that galaxy, for the first time in 26,000 years. And thus it is a 52,000 year cycle, which is the common denominator in all the Mayan teachings, the 52 cards in a deck of cards, playing cards, which are actually tarot cards. And but my reading, most importantly, that I would tell the world from what I know, and I've been studying this for over 50 years, and I would say that 26,000 years ago, as it's described in the Bhagavad Gita, we had the great battle between good and evil on planet Earth that they call the Mahabharata. And it is a common or well-known book of the Vedic scriptures that originated in what is now India. And the base story is the prince of the world, who is on the side of good, is reluctant to fight the battle between good and evil because he has relatives and friends on the other side. And God has incarnated as their version of Christ, Krishna, and he tells him to quit whining and get in there and fight and win. That was 26,000 years ago, and it's my estimation that we lost that battle. And likewise, it is my estimation that we have won that battle on planet Earth this time around.
Now, the passing of Ravi Shankar, does that have any bearing on any of this?
I would say very much. Yes. All those leaving the planet, that's a great celebration. It's a great event for them. We know that just from those who have come back from the brink of that. And so all those who've gone over to that side are not to be worried about. It's we here that mourn them in the way we have so much recently.
It's fascinating stuff, Nelson, fascinating. I have copies of the Bhagavad Gita. I can't even pronounce it, but you explaining it is so important. It's thank you very much.
I'm really glad to have the opportunity, Joe.
We had a harmonic convergence, was it back in 1987?
That's right.
What's a harmonic convergence?
Well, that's another lineup of the planets. Now, myself, I'm kind of a regular guy and just a struggling artist and musician, you know. So this topic and politics and literature and any number of things, I consider myself a dilettante or a dabbler at best. However, it turns out that I seem to know more than anybody else I run into on all these subjects.
It runs
really
very deep.
I assure you.
It runs very deep, and even, I like that word dilettante. Even so, I think you're being humble because you have a good grasp of it, better than I do.
Sometimes that is the case, that a little standing somewhat outside of the very topic. Of course, we know that gives you a clearer vision and one too involved.
Have you ever read the Kybalion? Kybalion.
I've been becoming familiar with Kabbalic scripture or writings and sciences. That particular one, I can't say that it rings a bell right off.
It's Hermetic philosophy. Hermes Trismegistus, who may have been the Egyptian god Thoth. Thoth.
Absolutely. It's the three. Of course. In my knowledge, it's Philos, who was the leader of Atlantis for 30,000 years. In a period when men lived to be 1,000 years easily, which is the normal lifespan for humans, before what we call the fall or the flood, which was Atlantis. And now we're finding out that all of America was a great outpost of Atlantis, and had been planned to be the new Atlantis, and structures all throughout the Northeast, the Midwest, and actually throughout the Southwest and in the Northeast. We have great structures that were apparently built by the Atlanteans to restart a culture which was strictly the only workload they had was learning, universities, sports, and there was no actually workload because they were conscious of the power of manifestation from the fifth chakra, the seat of the heart, where you'll see pictures of Jesus with his heart, with his chest open and his heart beating. That's the whole point, is get your consciousness up to the heart level. In the fall of the Atlanteans, it's in all our scriptures in any, whatever discipline you're in, you'll have the fall, and this was decided by the Council of Extraterrestrials who run the Earth experiment since way before humans were here. And that is run by a council of dedicated servants, and we describe them in our religious scriptures as angels, prophets, and just great workers of light. And those are the extraterrestrials. They are visiting us. They have been here. They've met with our great leaders. And the reason that the great leaders did not share their message with us is this. They came and asked us to stop burning materials on planet Earth, that is, wood, petroleum, gas, anything. It's destroying this planet, and it's a very primitive non-technology. The other thing they asked us is to please stop exploding the atom. That is affecting the entire universe. And when our leaders said, well, what will we use as a substitute? What do you use as your form of power? Now, the answer was this. We control our ships, and we get the power we need to do anything we use. All of our tools are self-made, emanating from each one of us. They were not built in assembly lines where you put humans in a Dante's Inferno factory and tediously build things. We manifest them like as you grow trees. This is the way they had a technology on Atlantis also. But these extraterrestrials, all their ships are powered by a high form of meditative emotion. In other words, they are able to control attraction and repulsion, and at such a high level, it is involved in sound, which is one of the things that saved humans on planet Earth, was their development of great musical works, which the extraterrestrials are appreciative of. They watch us just like we would watch any of our gear experiments or our attempts to conserve wildlife. They're in a desperate rush in that attempt right now to keep this planet going, and they're running out of options. So we will see more of what we're seeing, which is great upheaval. And the storms we are experiencing now, and those that we have up until this point, and all of the world conscious events that have been occurring, should be enough for anyone to take a very humble recognition that this was a great change that has just taken place in this last weekend.
Now, Nelson, when you see a movie like The Day After Tomorrow, and I admit that, you know, the filmmaker there, he did Independence Day, Roland Emmerich. It's a crude gospel, if you will. Very popular, though. Do you think someone is sending messages through these films that reach such a vast audience?
Yes.
As crudely as it's told, it does show the world kind of freezing to expel the virus. Okay,
that's a principle. My general take on most of these is they haven't quite. These are still their imaginations. They haven't taken the actual reality that is available to all of us through all the channeled experience, from Edgar Cayce to the Arcturian group, that the Raw group, messages from Michael. These have been coming as long as I've been studying from back in the 50s, and before that we had Alice Cooper. Alice Bailey, who founded the Theosophical Society and wrote the treatise on white magic. And before that, we had Professor Elena Blavatsky, a great scientist, who regularly channeled all her books through a Tibetan ascended master. My contact with the extraterrestrial experience is through my friend. You may have heard he has a show on international radio. I won't go into that right now, but he's a friend of mine who has had this experience with the extraterrestrials, and they are benevolent. If they wanted to do anything, they could end us anytime. Any of the extraterrestrials could end all human life in an instant, just by a thought. So no one should think you have to defend yourself. However, there are some of those that we would consider kind of cold and not very considerate, the reptilian and the insect intelligent humanoids. And if you have problems with anything like that, or even even on the lower astral levels on Earth, with disembodied beings who haven't left, or troubled beings, it's always in your power to just say, I refuse, and don't come forward, and I stop you with all my power. That's a protection for anything you might be afraid of. So, including hunger and cold, which we will be experiencing, and great heat and famine. Those are on the way, but I believe that that the power of this, when these things happen, humans generally come together rather than go into battle.
And you were speaking so gloriously that this is a good time, and now it's doom and gloom. I don't understand.
Well, that's a part of the game, If it was too good, we wouldn't pay attention.
Perhaps. I have a theory, Nelson.
Yes.
You brought up Edgar Casey.
Yes.
And I'll just do an aside. There's a Theosophical Society in Boston on Bay State Road.
Yes, that's Alice Bailey.
Okay, I went over there in the 70s and went there and checked it out. Right around the time of your album, Wild Angel.
Yes.
Maybe a couple of years before your album came out.
Yes.
Edgar Casey and Catherine Kuhlman, the great evangelist.
Right.
And Mary Baker Eddy, the founder and discoverer of Christian Science.
That's correct.
These three individuals, I found a common denominator. They read the Bible perhaps daily, and they read it from cover to cover multiple times. And I'm wondering if the way the Bible is written triggers the brain to another realm of possibility, another wavelength. Because these three individuals came from different backgrounds. Edgar Casey went into a trance. Mary Baker Eddy used the healing power that Jesus gave us. Catherine Kuhlman said she was the water bucket for God. She was just carrying God's water bucket. So the three of them read the Bible, but the three of them had enormous power, and they became very famous. So on one level, it did propel them to fame. I'm just looking at that as an indicator of they weren't ordinary people.
No, and myself, I've never really taken on that task of reading through the Bible. I've always found it a little too fragmented and obscure, a little too subtle or whatever for me. I would be a little more open to something like the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, which American archaeologists found in 1925 in the Yucatan Peninsula and the ruins of Palenque. And a copy of these Emerald Tablets stayed stored in the basement of the Smithsonian until a twin copy was found between the Sphinx and the Great Pyramid in 1998. And at that point, the Japanese part of the archaeological team ran off with them in the middle of the night, so the Western world didn't get to see those. But then someone remembered that we had a copy in the Smithsonian. So those, I think, to me, there's a really great couple of translations. They were written 36,000 years ago, and they are the legendary tablets of Moses. Moses being not a person, but it's just simply a term meaning person from Egypt, as Abraham is a Brahmin from India. Just want to straighten that out so people, there's a reason it's called Time Giant.
What's called Time Giant?
Well, I came in 1943 during World War II as the son of a Royal Canadian Air Force pilot. And that was the end of the steam age. I traveled all across the country and back and forth to Canada on steam trains. And as I was getting a little more aware of, 3, 4, 5 years old, they introduced the diesel engines, and shortly after that, the great modernistical streamliners. And this was the new world, and they built great railroad stations and all the Union hubs all over the country, and that was the way to travel. But we have all witnessed the demise of that to the extent that we've seen that happen. That's a great system that went down.
Now, you know that China yesterday unveiled this high-speed train across China.
Yes.
And they've been purchasing a lot of our metal. So 10 years ago, you'd have to pay $50 to have your old car towed away. Now you get $200 for it.
Amazing.
And China seems to be purchasing this metal at a loss.
Yes.
And it goes on a boat and ships to China, slow boat to China, if you will. But they are now building an infrastructure, so this third world country is now a first-rate, world-class power.
Yes, and whenever I see these things, I'm like everybody else. I have a tendency to feel stress and anxiety, about, wow, things are going to go a little too far in this one direction. And then, not invariably, but in a majority of the time, something unexpected happens, and the trend is balanced to keep us going here. A lot of us thought it would be over by now. Those of us who saw the failed attempts to save the planet in the 60s and 70s are quite surprised at at how well it's maintained so far. Of course, the climate and the weather will bring us to a new level of difficulty. That's going to be really rough.
Well, I wonder why the human race doesn't build underground, really solid underground cities, and even under the ocean. There's so much potential, but there's no vision. You have people fighting. You have these gun problems. If we were all working in a spirit of harmony, we could build an incredible spacecraft, planet Earth, to really just be scholars and musicians and do what's natural.
Well, that is happening on a certain level. There is just like in the Star Trek, they're beaming people up. You can get beamed up, and in order to be eligible to be beamed up, you just have to have you have to be pretty open-minded. You have to be a volunteer flight on the planet. You have to do a lot of work. It's kind of like the Santa Claus list, how many good things you did, or how many things you did to bring things down, and that's just a matter of how your particles are charged, whether negative, where they cling back to Earth, or positive and light-filled, and they gravitate upwards through the levels of atmosphere and awareness, and actually bands of consciousness that are actually, we only have a very small band of perception of reality, which only really works on planet Earth. But it's anything can happen. The whole universe is run on the principle of uncertainty. So if you knew how to make everything right, nothing could exist. And if anything ever were perfect, then there wouldn't be anything. But it's all a game that the originator started to amuse himself, and that we continued when we requested to be incarnated into this planetary system.
Florence Scovel Shinn, The Game of Life.
Wonderful.
She's a wonderful, wonderful writer.
I love it, yes.
Nelson, I'd like to go a little back now. Your friend Lou Reed was he appreciated Delmore Schwartz.
Oh, yes.
Did you learn from Delmore Schwartz in Syracuse?
Well, I was a pretty naive kind of Midwestern guy, originally from Saskatchewan, Canada, so I was even more remote. And, you know, it took a while to get me educated, you know. But I made it to Syracuse University, and the Orange Bar, where there were these guys that had ideas and minds and talked about them. Delmore being one of them, and I remember quite a clique of these types. At that point, they hadn't quite started calling them beatniks, even, let alone hippie. But yes, I was a part of that crowd, and I learned a lot from all of them.
I have some of Delmore's books, thanks to you know, Lou Reed turning. The people that appreciated Lou got turned on to Delmore, so Lou did that. You know, he turned us on to you.
Yes, yes.
So was Ronnie James Dio part of that crowd?
I believe he was around there, but that's not someone that I you know, if I did, it's a lot of things. You know, I'm still piecing together, Joe. For instance, I just actually remembered that I was at Motown Studios in 1966 or 7 with a producer, and he's always thought that the stuff I was doing there inspired the whole Four Tops "Reach Out, I'll Be There" type of sound.
Was that Frank Wilson?
Yeah. Yes. Frank Wilson and. You know,
I'm sorry, we just lost Frank. Very sorry, you know.
We had Otis Williams from.
Oh yeah.
From my neighborhood here, and the Isley Brothers are all from my neighborhood. I've done things in their church, or churches that they go to in the neighborhood, and of course King Records is just a few blocks from here. And I was an aspiring songwriter, and I was approached by James' manager about how good. Somebody said I was a songwriter, and I was actually also a performer. In the summertime when I wasn't at Syracuse, attempted to write songs for James, but never quite made it there.
James Brown? Which James?
James Brown with King Records. A bunch of my old bandmates from town here wound up as his band during his great period of fame, which started with the funk. I was pre-funk. That was not my cup of tea there. I was more of a please, 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 lost someone, try me. So, which is what I'm doing on my new album. I believe you'll hear some of these familiar themes and approaches to these emotional outbursts that you'll hear on my record, Steam Age Time Giant, which is actually on my own label, R&B Records. And Joe, I guess I should spell it out, which it would be capital A-R-E, lowercase and, capital B-E, .com.
R and B-E?
B as in being.
E.
Just one E.
.com.
Yes.
randb.com. That's very clever. As it's 8:34 p.m., I would like to ask you to speed up to the 70s. And our magic question, what was the demo that got the deal for Wild Angel by Nelson Slater on RCA Records?
Okay, that was a undertaking that I worked on for many years, trying to capture what I hadn't heard captured in studios. I went to great lengths to set things up so that we didn't have a common studio where an engineer says, 1, 2, 3, go. Now let's do the second take. Now let's do the 87th take, you know? So I had a lot of experience with that and noticed that I didn't get any the results I wanted. And I was after the sound which came along when I was a kid. The big studios and the big labels controlled the music business in the early 50s, as you remember. Along comes phenomena, little grassroots labels throughout the country and the countryside started making their own little homemade records, and this crazy music popped up called rock and roll. Remember that?
Oh, yeah.
So that started happening in the mid-50s. So you'd see a guy from Wisconsin or a farm, Wisconsin, on Dick Clark's Saturday night show from the Little Theater on 57th Street in New York, and you'd see Robin Luke come on there, or Jody Reynolds, or some that became even more famous, Jack Scott, Thomas Wayne, groups like the Fleetwoods and the other group with the guy named Phil Spector coming there. Myself, I started going to the Brill Building, 1750 Broadway, in about 1958. Spent many hours singing on the stairs throughout the building with guys named Paul and guys named Dion and Phil, you know, and all points in between. Writing songs for music publishers, little offices with a upright piano, and sometimes a little tape recorder, and do your song, and 6 months later you hear your record on the radio, but it was somebody else.
Fascinating.
Great.
With RCA, did you have a demo, or did Lou Reed set that up?
Well, then there was a demo that I recorded in my own stubborn, obstinate way, and you know, wound up working. I had gone to San Francisco, and I just did some fantastic on-the-spot recordings, and carried everything I had there, played it over the system. Place went wild. Lou walks in, and we're dancing around, and he's happy. I'm going to get on the label. And then we spent a year looking for a producer before the light turned on to have Lou produce the record, which is fantastic. That's the only way I would have gotten through it. And so we produced the greatest record ever made. But I got a girlfriend when it came time to do the mixing, and now those New York girls are. I was out shopping for diamonds and stuff, you know.
Wow.
So Lou was working his butt off trying to mix it down, and you know, I should have been there to help, but you know, that's the way it works. And on the overall, my take on it, and which I've learned from my guides that I've contacted with, that at every stage of the way when I was about to become a great star, they foresaw that I was going to be a great star like Janis, Jimmy, and Jim, and that would be my fate. That kind of stardom is really hard. It's really a stress in the heart chakra and the solar plexus. And all stars will tell you this. And they, you know, if I had been the recipient of this great fame and fortune, I do not believe that I would have survived that up until this time.
Interesting.
And I believe that for that very reason, I have come as the steam age time giant at this time to move music forward in the way that I could see my gift being able to bring great happiness to the world.
Now, you know, Lou Reed performed Complete the Story Now as an encore to his tour prior to Coney Island Baby.
Isn't that amazing? Now,
he had Doug Yule of the Velvet Underground on the tour with him.
It's wonderful. Doug's so wonderful. a couple of weeks ago, I played at a club here in Idaniknek called the Motor Pub. It's a really elegant place downtown here. And it was more or less a casual affair. And my longtime partner, Leslie Ann Knockbauer, came down from a town near here called see if I can do this. I can't pronounce it backwards. It's called Dayton. Anyway, she appeared, and someone happened to be taping that, and it was the closing of the set, which, well, really beautifully, and the closing song was "Complete This Story Now," and that has turned out to be the last song on the new album, Steam Age Time Giant, Joe.
Nice. So one clarification, you were in San Francisco with the demos and Lou walked in San Francisco?
Actually, yes. That's where I ran into him the first time. It's a little... if only I could remember all these things a little more clearly, but, my memory's getting better all the time, rather than the tendency for most people at my age. I seem to be clarifying. I quit weekend warrioring with strictly beer over ice. Even that was too much for me. So I quit that many years ago. So I don't have that excuse. And so that may be a part of the reason I'm so ready to do what I'm going to do now. I hope to be, right now, I think we're on for South by Southwest. Have plans to do LA, San Francisco, Seattle, Portland, and then points east, Philadelphia, 3 venues in New York, Brooklyn, and Boston, Joe.
We should try to get you at the Cantab in Boston here in Cambridge.
I was just thinking that might work out real good.
So we'll talk about that off camera. But anyway, I so much appreciate you calling in tonight. If you do come to Boston, we got to have you right in the studio. Maybe play a little and talk more about R&B.
Love to do that, Joe.
That'd be awesome. Are you writing any text to go along with your music? Are you going to have a book along with the CD?
Oh, the songs just keep pouring out. It just gets in the way. I got to stop everything to write another song. I got Sucker Punch, Sucker Punch. You only get to do it once. I've got Checker Pass, Checker Pass. Let's see. They're coming down to me. Man in the Middle, trying to solve a riddle, trying to find out who's true or fickle. Man in the Middle, trying to solve a riddle. Dish ran away with the cat and the fiddle. Man in the Middle, trying to solve a riddle. Bitch ran away with the kids and the kibble. Man in the Middle, wiping away all the piss and the spittle. Jumping from the frying pan to the griddle. Man in the Middle, Joe.
To the griddle, the man in the middle. Hey, Nelson Slater, great to have you as our final guest of the year.
Wow, what an honor.
2012, we start the new program next Thursday night with January, what will it be, the 3rd, I guess?
Wow, that's a great date.
Yep, January 3rd, 2013, 3/3. But tonight is 12/27/12.
Wow.
And Nelson Slater, thank you so much, man. It's an honor.
Thanks, Joe. I'll see you very soon.
Happy New Year.
Happy 26,000 years.
That's right. Thanks, man.
Good night.
Good night. The great Nelson Slater, we're very honored. Nelson had a tremendous RCA album called Wild Angel, produced by Lou Reed. And, well, it should come out with bonus tracks.